Have you ever been in the middle of something genuinely good and caught yourself already thinking about when it would be over? Have you ever worked towards something for years, arrived at it, felt the satisfaction last about 3 days, and found yourself looking toward the next thing before the current one had time to settle? Have you ever looked back at a period of your life and realized that you spent most of it somewhere else mentally, at the next milestone, the next version, the life that would begin once this particular stretch concluded? If you're nodding at any of those, this conversation is about what's actually happening in those moments. Not just the habit of distraction, but a deeper structural problem in how a lot of people relate to their own existence. One that tends to get worse the more accomplished and forward-oriented you are, and that produces a specific kind of suffering that has nothing to do with circumstances being bad. Here's the core of it. Most people operate with an implicit belief that their real life begins later, not consciously. It's rarely something anyone would say out loud. But functionally, in terms of where attention and emotional investment actually go, what is actually here is treated as preparation rather than as the thing itself. There's always a version of, once this is settled, once the project is done, once the relationship is more stable, once the financial situation resolves, once the kids are older, the health improves, the apartment is bigger, the career is further along. The remarkable thing about this structure is that it doesn't dissolve when the conditions are met. Each arrival generates a new departure point. Each once becomes the backdrop for the next once. The person who spent their 20s waiting for their career to be established spends their 30s waiting for the next threshold. Not because they're ungrateful or insufficiently motivated to appreciate what they have, but because the waiting for later became the default mode of engaging with existence. And a default mode doesn't switch off just because external circumstances change. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about this in the 19th century under the name the aesthetic stage, a mode of living organized around possibility rather than actuality, around what might happen rather than what is happening, around tomorrow as a location where the interesting, the meaningful, and the real are always just about to begin. He noticed that people in this mode are typically in motion, typically curious, typically energetic in their pursuit of the next thing. They don't look like people who are suffering. From the outside, and often from the inside, this looks like enthusiasm, ambition, forward momentum. What he also noticed is that this mode has no center. It is entirely reactive, not to what's present, but to what's anticipated. The person isn't actually anywhere. They're always just ahead of themselves, in a location that keeps receding as they approach it. He called the result of living this way indefinitely a specific kind of despair. Not acute despair, not a crisis. A low-grade, pervasive sense of disconnection from one's own life that's extremely difficult to name and easy to mistake for restlessness, boredom, or simply needing a change. There's a mechanism that makes this pattern self-perpetuating in a specific way that neuroscience helps explain. When you anticipate something good, the brain releases dopamine. This is often described as a pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. Dopamine is more accurately a chemical of anticipation. It activates in response to the prediction of reward rather than the reward itself. This means the act of looking forward to something produces a neurochemical experience that is, in certain respects, more intense than the experience of actually having the thing. The anticipation has its own payoff. And once that payoff has been delivered, once the thing is actually obtained, there is frequently a drop. Not to suffering, but from the elevated state of anticipation back toward baseline, which is often interpreted as disappointment or as the thing not being what was hoped for, when in reality, it is simply the absence of the anticipatory state. This creates a structural incentive to remain in anticipation, The brain gets more from looking forward than from arriving, which means the pattern of future orientation is partly maintained by a neurological mechanism that has nothing to do with what's actually worth wanting and everything to do with what produces the most consistent chemical reward. This gets significantly worse in the specific conditions of contemporary life. Social media creates a curated stream of other people's arrivals, their launches, their achievements, their meaningful moments, their significant transitions. All of it is real in some sense, but the selection is extreme. What gets shared is the arrival, not the preparation, not the ordinary days, not the long stretches between the moments worth photographing. The effect on someone viewing this stream is a continuous reference to everyone else's arrivals alongside the experience of their own perpetual preparation. Not consciously. The comparison isn't usually deliberate. But the ongoing exposure shapes what feels normal, what feels like sufficient progress, what feels like being where you should be. The result is a quiet but persistent sense that others are already somewhere you haven't reached, which feeds exactly the orientation toward a future arrival where you'll finally be there too. Economic structures contribute their own pressure. Retirement planning requires you to conceive of your life as accumulation toward a future point of security. Career trajectories are articulated as sequences of steps toward progressively advanced positions. Educational systems orient students explicitly toward their future utility. The entire infrastructure of modern professional life is organized around what you're building toward, rather than what you're presently inhabiting. None of this is malicious. Forward planning has genuine value. The problem is total immersion in a structure where everything is instrumental, where every present moment is understood primarily as a means toward a future state, rather than as having any value in itself. This particular trap is one of the quieter sources of suffering in contemporary life. If it's reaching you, subscribe. Albert Camus, writing from a very different philosophical tradition than Kierkegaard, arrived at something adjacent from a different direction. His concern was the relationship between consciousness and what is actually here, specifically the tendency to evade the full weight of the present through one of two strategies. The first is distraction, filling every available moment with activity, input, and stimulation that prevents the present from having to be genuinely inhabited. The second is deferral, treating the present as a temporary condition that will be replaced by a better future and reserving genuine engagement for when that version of things arrives. Both strategies, in his view, were responses to the same underlying discomfort, the rawness and uncertainty of being here in one's own existence without the buffer of what's coming next. His answer was what he called revolt, a specific orientation toward present experience that refuses both strategies, not the performance of gratitude or the forced appreciation of what's here. Something more demanding, the willingness to be fully where you are, with all the uncertainty and incompleteness that involves, rather than perpetually relocating yourself into a future where things will finally be settled. Here's what this actually costs. Specifically, in terms of relationships, people are available to be genuinely known only when they are genuinely present. Not performing presence, not the body being there while the mind is elsewhere, but actually attending to the person in front of them with the particular kind of attention that makes real contact possible. When someone is primarily future-oriented, their relational availability is consistently partial. They're in the conversation, but they're also already processing the next thing, already calculating the implications of this conversation for the situation they're building toward, already somewhere beyond the present exchange. Other people feel this, not always consciously, and not always in a way they can articulate, but the experience of talking to someone who is physically present but mentally elsewhere has a specific quality that most people have encountered and found leaving them slightly cold. a sense that they're speaking into a partial attention, that something essential isn't quite landing, that the connection that should be forming isn't quite forming. The accumulation of this across years produces relationships that are, in a specific sense, thinner than they should be. Not worse in any obvious way, not less loving or less committed, just thinner, less genuinely inhabited, less fully present on at least one side, which means less capable of the depth that only sustained mutual presence makes possible. There's a version of this that affects creative and intellectual work in ways that are worth examining separately. Work that requires genuine insight, the kind where new understanding forms, where previously unconnected things come together, where something that wasn't known before becomes known, tends to require a specific quality of attention. Not urgently goal-directed attention, more like relaxed, wide-ranging, only loosely purposeful attention that allows associations to form without immediately pressing them toward utility. This quality of attention is not particularly compatible with the orientation toward future outcomes. The person who is primarily focused on what the work will produce, what it will enable, where it will position them. That person is using their attention in a way that is less available for the kind of wandering, spacious, curiosity-driven presence that generates the connections they're actually looking for. This is why many of the most productive intellectual and creative moments happen not during intensely goal-directed work, but during the walk, the shower, the idle conversation, the moment of apparent unproductivity. Not because idleness is itself generative, but because it temporarily releases the grip of future directedness and allows the kind of attention that genuine insight requires. Deliberately building more of that quality of attention into work life. Not by working less, but by periodically releasing the grip on outcome, tends to improve both the quality of the work and the experience of doing it. The philosopher Martin Heidegger used a word, Dasein, that translates roughly as being there or being in the world. One of his central preoccupations was the relationship between genuine being in the world and what he called falling, the tendency to be absorbed in das Man, the anonymous they of social convention and distraction, in a way that prevents genuine encounter with one's own existence. What he was describing in dense philosophical language is something practically recognizable. The experience of going through the motions of a life rather than genuinely inhabiting it. Being occupied rather than present. Moving through experiences that are nominally yours while never quite being fully there for any of them. He connected this directly to the relationship with time. The person who is absorbed in Das Man relates to time as something to be filled, managed, and gotten through. Time as a container for activity rather than as the medium in which genuine existence happens. The person in genuine being in the world relates to time differently, not as something to be consumed efficiently on the way to a future destination, but as the actual texture of being alive, which can only ever be encountered in the present tense. This is not mysticism, it's a description of a difference in how attention is directed that has observable effects on the quality of experience, the depth of relationships, and the accessibility of the kind of genuine engagement with one's own existence that most people, when they're honest, would describe as what they most want from their lives. There's something specific that happens when people who have been future-oriented for a long time first genuinely encounter the present. It's not pleasant, at least not initially. The present, inhabited directly rather than passed through on the way to somewhere else, can feel empty. There's no anticipatory charge, no sense of building towards something, no narrative arc of progress. There's just what's here as it is, with all of its incompleteness and uncertainty and ordinariness. For someone accustomed to the dopamine of anticipation, this can feel flat, like something is wrong. Like this can't be what's meant by being here, because surely being here would feel more significant than this. What's actually happening is that the brain is recalibrating. The elevated state of anticipation is no longer present because there's nothing specific to anticipate. What remains is experience without enhancement, which initially registers as lesser, but which is actually more accurate. The baseline, the actual texture of a life not currently charged by anticipation of something coming. With practice, with repeated, deliberate returning to this quality of attention, even when it initially feels flat, most people find that the texture changes. Not because presence becomes inherently more exciting, because the things that were always there become more available, the specific quality of a person's company, the particular interest of work being done for its own sake, the experience of physical sensation, the reality of what's actually happening rather than what's about to happen. This is a genuine recalibration rather than a permanent diminishment. It takes time, and it requires a willingness to stay with flatness long enough for what's actually present to come into focus, rather than retreating into anticipation at the first sign that the present feels insufficient. There is a specific error that people make when they understand this problem and attempt to address it. They turn presence into a project, they research it, they develop a technique, they measure their progress, they set goals for how present they intend to be and assess themselves against those goals. They approach the problem with exactly the same forward-oriented, outcome-focused energy that created the problem in the first place. This is not the same as being here. This is a future-oriented relationship to the idea of presence, building toward a future state of being present, rather than simply being here now, in this moment, without any project involved. The recognition of this error is itself useful, even if it doesn't immediately resolve it. Presence is not achievable through effort in the conventional sense. It's not built. It's accessed by releasing rather than by acquiring, by releasing the grip on what's coming next, rather than by constructing a better version of yourself who has mastered the skill of being here. This is genuinely counterintuitive for people whose effectiveness in most areas of life has come through deliberate, goal-directed effort. It requires a fundamentally different mode, not better application of the same approach, but abandonment of the approach itself. What planning and forward-thinking actually require, and what they don't require, is worth distinguishing precisely because the confusion between them is a major source of the problem. Planning requires that you take the future into account when making present decisions. It does not require that you inhabit the future mentally while making those decisions. You can decide to save a portion of your income for future security while being genuinely in the conversation happening over dinner. You can build toward a long-term goal while being fully engaged in the step you're currently on. You can have genuine aspirations without treating the present as merely instrumental to their realization. The confusion arises because most goal-oriented frameworks don't distinguish between these. They treat future orientation as a virtue and present focus as a distraction from what matters. The implicit message is that fully inhabiting the present is what people do when they don't have anything significant to work toward. That genuine ambition looks like always being mentally ahead of where you currently are. This is exactly backward. The capacity to be fully engaged with what's in front of you right now, to be genuinely where you are rather than perpetually somewhere else, is what makes both the present and the future better. Not at the expense of each other, as a single integrated way of being in time. Children do something naturally that most adults have lost and most adults would dismiss as unproductive. They attend completely to whatever is in front of them, not because they have no sense of future. Children understand time and sequence and consequence. but because they haven't yet installed the default relationship to the present as a means rather than as an end. The stick is not interesting because of what sticks will later enable. It's interesting now, completely, for whatever it is right now. This isn't naivety. It's a capacity for presence that most adults have educated, shamed, and hurried themselves out of. The adult equivalent isn't to be absorbed in sticks. It's to bring that quality of full, interested, undeferred attention to whatever is actually present. The conversation, the work, the meal, the walk, the person across the table. Most adults experience this occasionally and call it flow. They don't recognize it as the same capacity children use all day, or recognize that it's accessible not only during peak performance but during ordinary life if the grip on what's coming next is sufficiently released. Here's a practical starting point that doesn't require developing any particular skill. For 1 week, whenever you notice yourself already somewhere else, already at the end of the current task, already past the current conversation, already in the future version of the situation, just notice it. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to force yourself back into the present. Just observe the moment of departure, the exact point at which attention left what was actually happening and relocated to what's about to happen or what might happen or what this is building toward. The noticing itself is useful. Not because noticing causes presence, but because the pattern of departure, once seen repeatedly and specifically, becomes harder to inhabit unconsciously. The automatic nature of the habit is partly what sustains it. Making it visible, seeing exactly when and how it happens, not in the abstract, but in actual real-time observation, introduces a small gap between the habit and its execution that didn't exist before. That gap is where something different becomes possible, not immediately, not through a single week of observation, but the gap, once created, is where the alternative has room to occur. Money is worth addressing directly because the economic relationship to time is particularly entrenched and particularly rarely examined. The entire structure of financial planning is built on a specific relationship with the future. Sacrifice now for security later. Defer gratification in the present in order to accumulate what's needed for the future. Treat what you're currently spending as an investment in what you'll eventually have. This is practical advice. There's nothing wrong with it as a component of financial life. The problem is when this logic bleeds into the broader relationship with time, when the mode of deferral that makes financial sense gets applied not just to money, but to attention, engagement, and genuine inhabiting of one's own life. When the same mental structure that governs the retirement account also governs whether you're actually in the conversation at dinner or whether you're using that dinner to think about the meeting tomorrow morning. Many highly productive, financially responsible people have built an entire psychology of permanent deferral from financial habits that were, in isolation, entirely reasonable. The discipline that allows them to save consistently also makes it difficult to fully spend the currency of attention, to give what's happening right now the full weight of their presence without calculating the return. This isn't an argument against financial planning. It's a distinction between using future orientation as a tool for specific practical purposes and using it as the default mode through which you engage with your entire existence. There is a specific experience that comes with long illness or with proximity to death, either one's own serious illness or someone else's, that almost everyone who has had it describes in the same way. Ordinary things become vivid. The specific light in the afternoon, the particular quality of a friend's voice, the taste of coffee, things that were always there but were passing through the attention without being genuinely registered because the attention was always elsewhere, at what was coming next, at what needed to be resolved, and suddenly aren't passing through anymore. Suddenly, they're there, completely, in the way they always were but never quite got to be before. People who have had this experience and return to ordinary health often report that it fades, not immediately. Over months, the vividness of ordinary things gradually diminishes. The attention returns to its previous habitat of anticipation and deferral, and what had been intensely present once again becomes merely background. This is not because the things changed. It's because the grip of future orientation reasserted itself. The intensity of ordinary experience when it occurs is not a product of exceptional circumstances. It's what is always available when the habitual redirection of attention elsewhere is suspended. The exceptional circumstances, serious illness, proximity to death, simply suspend it involuntarily. They force the habitual reorientation to stop, which allows what is always there to be experienced as it actually is. There is a specific way this trap affects parenting that is difficult to talk about because of the guilt it tends to produce, but that's important enough to address directly. Children are entirely present, not as a conscious practice. They haven't chosen it. They're not being mindful. They're just here, in the way that people are, when they haven't yet installed the infrastructure of perpetual anticipation. This means that when a child is trying to engage with a parent, they're bringing the full weight of their attention to the interaction, and they can feel, not in any analytical way, just in the immediate way that children receive things, whether they're being met with equivalent presence or with partial presence, whether the parent is genuinely there or is there in body while actually somewhere else. Children of chronically future-oriented parents often describe something in adulthood that they couldn't have named as children, a persistent sense that they were never quite the priority, that they couldn't quite access the parent fully, that something was always interposed between them and the parent's real attention. What was interposed was the future, the work that needed doing, the problem that needed solving, the version of the situation that would arrive once the current one resolved. None of it was chosen out of indifference. Most of it came from genuine care and genuine effort toward building something good for the family. But the child can't feel the care that's located in the future. They can only feel what's here. Here is a distinction that practically resolves a lot of the confusion about what this is actually asking for. There is a difference between being present in time and being lost in time. Being lost in time is what happens when someone is so absorbed in what's immediately in front of them that they can't maintain any larger perspective, can't step back, can't see patterns, can't make decisions that account for consequences beyond the current moment. This is not what's being described as desirable. Being present in time is different. It's bringing full attention to what is actually happening while retaining the capacity to think clearly about where it's headed and what it means in a larger context, not at the expense of that contact with what's here, as a complement to it. This is what skilled practitioners in almost any domain actually do. The surgeon is not thinking about the next surgery during this surgery. The musician is not calculating the reception of later passages while playing the current one. The parent having a real conversation with their child is not processing how that conversation will affect future parenting challenges. They are here completely, skillfully, while the larger context remains available as a resource rather than as a substitute for the actual experience of doing the work. This quality is not a form of naivety or short-sightedness. It is the precondition for excellence in almost anything genuinely difficult. The full attention that genuine presence allows is the full attention that genuine work requires. There's a final layer to this that connects everything else, the relationship between this trap and the experience of meaning. Most people, when they think about what makes life meaningful, point toward things that are by their nature located in the future. Accomplishments, contributions, legacies. the impact of their work on people not yet known to them. These aren't wrong, but they're incomplete in a specific way. Meaning is not primarily a future-facing phenomenon. It is something that arises or fails to arise in the actual encounter between a person and what they're doing, who they're with, and how fully they're there for it. You cannot experience meaning in a conversation you're only half attending to. You cannot experience meaning in work that you're treating as a stepping stone rather than as a thing worth doing for itself. You cannot experience meaning in a relationship whose primary significance in your mind lies in the stability it provides for what you're building toward, rather than in the relationship itself. The trap of living for the future doesn't only steal the present, it undermines the very conditions in which meaning becomes possible. Because meaning requires that you actually show up for whatever is happening, which is precisely what future orientation prevents. This is the deepest version of the cost. Not that good things are missed, not that relationships are shallower than they could be, not that creative work suffers, but that the experience of a life felt as genuinely meaningful, the sense that what you're doing matters and that you are genuinely participating in your own existence, depends on a quality of engagement with the actual that cannot be deferred without consequence. The conditions for that experience don't exist anywhere in the future. They exist wherever you are, in whatever you're doing, with whoever is present as soon as you're actually there. And as soon as you're actually there is not a condition that requires anything external to change. It requires only the willingness to direct attention toward what is here rather than toward what is coming, which is available right now, in this moment, without any preparation and without waiting for anything at all to be different than it currently is. That's either a radical idea or a completely obvious one. Sometimes it's both at once. The fact that it can be completely obvious and still almost never actually practiced, that most people can nod at the idea and return immediately to the mental habitat of anticipation, is itself part of what makes this particular trap so persistent. Understanding it doesn't free you from it. That's the honest thing to say at the end. What understanding provides is the ability to notice in specific moments that the departure has occurred. The noticing itself is the beginning of something different, not presence automatically, but the gap in which return becomes possible. The gap is enough to start with. For the comments, what is the "once this is settled" that you've been using to defer genuine engagement with your present life? Name it specifically, not as a criticism, as an observation. That's what this kind of clarity actually produces. I'll see you in the next one. Word count, 5,000 plus words. Estimated video length, 40 to 45 minutes. The regrets that people report most consistently at the end of life are not about achievements they failed to reach or goals they didn't accomplish. They're about the texture of the life that was actually lived while trying to reach those achievements and accomplish those goals. The conversations they weren't fully in, the people they were with but not present to, the experiences that passed through them rather than being genuinely inhabited. These are not regrets about things that would have required different choices. They're regrets about a quality of attention that was available and not used, that could have been applied to exactly the life that was being lived, to the actual people who were there, to the specific moments that came and went while the mind was somewhere else. This is in some ways the most important thing to understand about this problem, because it doesn't require better circumstances to address. It requires a different relationship to the circumstances already present. What you keep relocating yourself into is not where your life is. Your life is here, in the current configuration, with the current people, in the current work and the current difficulty and the current ordinary Tuesday. That's not a consolation. That's actually good news. it means nothing needs to change before you can begin inhabiting it more fully. For the comments, what is the "once this is settled" that you've been using to defer genuine engagement with your present life? Name it specifically, not as a criticism, as an observation. That's what this kind of clarity actually produces. I'll see you in the next one.